Article 30. Article 30 is a motion to appropriate $150,000 for the Medfield State Hospital. It was offered by the Board of Selectmen. It's on page 57 of the warrant report. And we have a motion and a report from Warrant Committee Chairperson Michael Pastore.
Move that the town appropriate $150,000, said sum to be raised on the FY20 tax levy for the purposes printed in the warrant. Since the Medfield State Hospital Design Committee was formed in late August, they've solicited input on the redevelopment opportunity from experienced developers through a formal request for information process, and then had individual follow-up discussions with these firms. Through the process, the MSHDC determined that further technical analysis of certain aspects of the potential MSH redevelopment would be critical in advancing the effort. Specific technical areas they intend to focus on currently include gaining a better and more accurate understanding of likely infrastructure costs, both on the site and potentially off-site implications on resources like town water and environmental remediation costs associated with existing structures, whether these be addressed through redevelopment or in the alternative through demolition. The master plan was valuable in highlighting these issues, but according to the MSHDC, additional and more concrete information is necessary to better understand these barriers to redevelopment and to determine how we might best mitigate potential costs and/or liabilities to the town. The Board of Selectmen is requesting $150,000 for this article. We are all well aware the time and expense that has already gone into the Medfield State Hospital over the past few years. But the Warrant Committee believes this article is a sensible appropriation that seems necessary to move forward with finally being able to present a reuse proposal to the town. The Warrant Committee recommends passage.
Okay. I know we have Gus Murby wants to make a comment.
During the discussions with within the Board of Selectmen about this article, we talked about the fact that there was a somewhat similar article last year that was in the amount of $75,000 that was rejected by the taxpayers. We thought it was important to make a few comments about this before you vote this year. The purpose of this article, as Mike covered in detail, is a combination of supporting the development of the state hospital property as well as continuing the town's monitoring of the state's environmental cleanup. Out of that $150,000, it would be about $50,000 of it would probably be what's required for the environmental monitoring. And for any of you that aren't familiar with the property, there is one piece of property on the state hospital grounds that was not transferred to the town. The reason it wasn't is it's downhill from the old dry cleaning plant. There are serious pollutants in the ground, and the state is still on the hook to clean them up. And so our interest in continuing to monitor that is to make sure they do a credible job of it. The other $100,000 is to support the efforts of the Development Committee to move ahead with the development of the state hospital. Many of you, if not all of you, are aware that the State Hospital Master Planning Committee put together a master plan. You've probably read about the various awards that it's received for its quality. More importantly, that master plan was designed or developed over several years with the best of intentions to capture the desires and the aspirations that the people of Medfield had for the property. At this point in time, we're trying to move ahead with the development of that property, but in order to do that, the Development Committee is going to need some funds to support some additional analyses that support the town getting ready to actually move ahead with this. So last year, the development funds that were requested were voted down. You need to realize that the longer we take to develop this, it costs us about $150,000 to $160,000 a year just to maintain and secure it in its currently undeveloped state. So the decision not to put money in to promote development or to support development actually doesn't help us because we wind up adding time on the other end. So I would ask you to keep that point in mind. The one other point I wanted to cover, and this is still not cast in concrete, but for those of you who are concerned about, is this the point of no return and the roller coaster is about to go off the top with what we do with the state hospital, our current plans are to move ahead, and we hope to be able to move ahead with a special town meeting in the fall to ask the taxpayers to approve the zoning changes that would be required to support the redevelopment of the property in accordance with the master plan. The developers up to this point have indicated to us that the master plan is reasonable, and there is developer interest in doing that. However, when you have developers come down and sign up on the bottom line for a contract, that's when you find out whether it's really reasonable. So although we think we're on a good track, we recognize that there may be some changes. If that happens, the taxpayers will have a second opportunity to pass judgment on any changes that may be made. If we were to move ahead with an RFP and want to move ahead with a contract, the taxpayers will have to approve the disposition of that land. So any of you who aren't sure, what you're committing to right now, the commitment right now is to help the development committee continue to move ahead with the work it needs to do to be prepared to issue an RFP, and to help the town continue to monitor the environmental cleanup. Thanks.
Any other questions or comments on Article 30? Microphone number 2 first.
Jerry Potts, 7 Curve Street. So first of all, to the State Hospital Committee, I think they did an incredible job on this in a really hard project. I spent 4 years of time, and I want to thank them for the effort. A year ago, when the selectmen were talking about that plan, the hesitation to bringing it forward was the desire to get more financials, and there was a development committee and an RFI issued. The recommendation of the State Hospital Committee and 2 consultants who had been involved in that was an RFI would just kick it down the road, that the master plan was really 2 elements, a zoning and guidelines of general design for that property, of what the town would or could, to your point, Gus, stomach. What was too much development, what was too much density. My challenge on this is I think at this point in time, the town hasn't been presented the plan. It's public, but it hasn't been presented, number 1. And number 2, the only way we're going to really know if developers are interested is by issuing the RFP. So while I support the effort to put more money towards this, I think we have now delayed another year without having an RFP in the midst. So a town meeting in the fall, this will be the second fall that we're going to have one, and I'm not sure what delaying is doing. The development committee, the master plan had a RFP process, had hundreds of pages of documents. The RFI validated that there was interest by developers. Why can't we get it in front of the town to actually discuss and debate it, rather than hiring more consultants, more time to decide whether we issue an RFP? I think the town at this point deserves the opportunity to actually vote on the plan. So.
Please.
So I think, Jerry, the goal of this money is to get us in a position to put something on the table at a special town meeting. And I was a dissenting member of the Board of Selectmen on issuing the RFI, but the purpose of doing that was to get more information. There is still more information we need, because obviously, when this decision is put to the town meeting, we have to compare the costs and the benefits of the proposed master plan in whatever form it is, as proposed by the Board of Selectmen at the town meeting, to the costs and the benefits of continuing to own the property and doing something else. And so I see this money, as the warrant committee recommends, is not just how do we develop this further, because I don't think we needed another year to figure out how to do that, but to get the additional information we need on the costs and the risks and the likelihood of success of the master plan. Is under even the financial scenario developed by the Hospital Master Planning Committee, it gave itself only a 50-50 chance of being attractive and successful to a developer. And so they also deserve credit for honesty in the assessment they made of their proposal. And so even if people who favored development, if you're going to go forward with a 50-50 plan, we need to kick the tires more on that. And so to Gus's point as to whether this is letting the roller coaster down the hill, from my perspective, it is not. But I don't think we have everything we need to present the plan tonight, obviously. But I will say that this should be and ought to be and has to be presented to the town in the fall. And it's up to us to finish our work and the development committee to finish their work. And I think we do need some of that money. Even if you want to come to that special town meeting, as I believe our next speaker will, and oppose that plan, the people in the town need to have the best information we can present to them to understand what the ups and downs are of even adopting the zoning before then moving to what would be a second town meeting to vote on the potential sale or disposition in response to the RFP. So I agree with you, Jerry, that we're not going to know anything until there's an RFP. But at this point, to get from point A to point B, and I think frankly, if we had the $75,000 last year, we might have been able to get there for the originally scheduled special town meeting last fall.
Okay. Microphone number one. I waive the, you don't have to introduce yourself, John, I'll introduce you. This is John Harney. How are you?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, and through you to the meeting. Whoever thought when the town of Medfield really got behind the effort to convince the state that we should buy the land that the former state hospital sits on? As you remember, those of you who were here in those few years back, there were 440 units proposed by the Department of Capital Asset Management to go up on the hill, and clearly the people in Medfield thought that was far too many. They feared the consequential costs that would fall on the town after the developer took all of the credits, the affordable housing credits, historic credits, and credits you haven't even heard of yet, but they're all taxpayer credits. And they would put through the costs that would ensue from the development. Where would those go? They'd go on you, the homeowners, which of course pay for most of the taxes in this community, as you can read in your warrant report tonight. I'd like to commend the Board of Selectmen for their preliminary material in their warrant report and the hard work of the warrant committee. But this has been a tough year. You're looking, as I believe Mr. The chairman of the, Mike said there on the warrant committee, that we're looking at an average 3.2 increase. And indeed, if we hadn't taken all of last year's leftover tax levy, plus $500,000 from free cash, we'd be seeing another override this year. So things are not very good financially in the town of Medfield. You got major costs looming in water and sewer, in the school building, and so forth. What am I pleading for up here? I'm pleading for an appreciation of what that hospital property is. Many towns around us would love to have 134 acres of town-owned land. That is not to say that we shouldn't do some building up there, probably. But to follow what's been happening is to follow a course of action that's going to propose maybe 300 units, which will swell to 600 or 700 units before the developer gets done. You can look at Westboro. On a third of the acres that we're talking about here, roughly 90, short of that, and that has to be taken down with roadways and so forth. But no one is really talking seriously at this point about developing over where we have 12 acres we can develop on the other side, not the hillside where the buildings are, but down on the left there. No one wants to develop that land at this point. But the move is to develop and heavily develop the upper campus. Now you hear talk of the plan, and bless the people who worked on that. I sat into those meetings as a resource member that was never really listened to. But the simple fact is that you're going to end up there with a monumentally expensive project, because that's all that can go up there, really. We can't talk commercial up there. Every developer has told us that. The consultants really told us that. And you wonder why we went through three consultants? Because there was disagreement on the committee itself. Okay? So it's been a long, hard 4 years of meetings. What I asked for at the beginning was that we have some chance to look at that property and say, give me an alternative that's not going to be heavy, dense development that's going to fall upon the taxpayers. The good lady here was 89. Obviously, I'm still in my 20s, but I have been in town for 54 years at this point, and I've seen developers walk away from jobs, start it and leave it. Now, we saw one of those on Pine Street for a long, long number of years. So think hard and vote for this. I mean, we certainly need to clean up that laundry. Well, we don't clean it, the state has to clean it up, but we have to monitor the state, and that's where the money from the town goes, to make sure the state does its obligation. But we are grateful. I mean, this current committee is a very good committee. They're a no-nonsense committee. They're experienced in the building fields, and they will come through, I'm sure, with consultants who will inform us as to specific costs that we need and should have had, frankly, long ere now. We've spent considerable money. Mr. Murby has said this is a great burden on the town. You know, the town has currently $198,000, 199 if you round it up, in money that has come in from into the revolving fund from uses of that state hospital. So it hasn't been all downhill. We had actually a total of almost $273,000 has come in with no effort on the part of the town to rent that property or to gather money from it. So it's not all gloom and doom. That's an immensely valuable property and should be perceived as such. Now, what we do with the buildings and what we do about the costs is something else. Again, we have to figure that out. But I can promise you this, you put up hundreds of units, you're going to get millions in costs in perpetuity, at least as far as any generation in this room is concerned. They'll be here forever. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you, John. Microphone number one. Last comment.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. So this is probably my 10th appearance here at the town meeting to
This is Bill Massaro. by
yes,
the
I'm
way.
sorry. Bill Massaro, Evergreen Way.
I just waived his introduction, but
Yes,
you should be equally waived, yes.
I'm not offended by the.
No,
So anyway, I'm a 44-year resident of Medfield. I've lived next to the hospital for 44 years. It's obviously a cause that's been close to my heart. I've stood here the past 10 years advocating for funds so that the town would have environmental consultants to help us pretty much drag the state kicking and screaming to a cleanup up at the hospital. And we managed to do that. We managed to get a mediated settlement agreement for the cleanup in 2014, and the state is continuing to do that cleanup. Now, it's not the major portion of this current warrant article, but there is a fair amount of money still required for us to continue the management of the cleanup there. And I'd just like to give you a little background on what still needs to be done up there. So this year's article's funding is for support for the monitoring of the ongoing non-building environmental issues on the state property. The article also provides funding for further advice from consultants on the development of the hospital property and on environmental issues that are related to the buildings. And this would include demolition or any remediation of asbestos or other hazards within. But that is, quite frankly, not my concern. We are very close to finishing the remaining items under the settlement agreement. DCAM is putting forward a revised plan for the remediation of the laundry parcel that'll bring it to residential soil standards. This effort should be completed by June of 2020. So we are almost there. The other issue that's still open at the hospital is DCAM accepted responsibility for management and maintenance of the overlook area. And I'm sure many of you have been up to the overlook area. You've looked out over the river. You've walked down to the canoe launch and everything else. DCAM has agreed to take perpetual responsibility for monitoring and maintenance of the material that they drag out of the river and used to construct the overlook. They will be responsible that forever. The problem is that we have not yet finalized the language that will bind them to do that. And we need the legal consultant, environmental legal consultant's guidance to finalize that language. And then DCAM will be responsible to keep that area safe forever. So I am very much concerned about at least securing that material, that funding, to finish the job at the state hospital property. Now, we have other issues. I also attended every meeting of the Master Plan Development Committee. I have some issues with the plan. There are things that I think need to be finalized or definitized more accurately
Bill,
before we.
I'm
I'm finishing up.
I
I'm
want to
wrapping
keep
up.
it to the motion
I'm
as opposed to the plan.
I'm wrapping up.
Okay.
The items that need to be definitized by the new development committee, and what they're looking for funding for, are things like, how does the town get sewage from the hospital to the town treatment facility? How does the town, as John mentioned, what happens to the 234 units that are, 334 units that are proposed if the commercial content does not materialize at the hospital? How many more units do we get? Does the town have the water supply to meet the demand for the new hospital? All of these things need to be investigated before we go out on the street. This is what the balance of the funding will be used for. So I would urge you very much to please pass this article. Thank you.
Hey, and thank you as well for all the time and effort on this initiative. We're going to put this motion to a vote. We're looking at the motion on Article 30 to appropriate $150,000 for the Medfield State Hospital. If there's no other comments, we'll put that to a vote. Simple majority carries. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? The motion carries. Efficiency and deliberate dispatch by acting upon certain articles as a group. For reference, you can look to pages 18 and 19 of the report of the warrant.